At an executive gala, my uncle waved toward me, joking, "She's proof that good intentions aren't enough." I waited 24 years, then quietly organized a mass financial collapse of his corporate holdings. When bankruptcy hit, the family trust collapsed entirely. His children fled the country to avoid lawsuits. His grandchildren legally erased the family name from their passports, and his once proud dynasty was quietly written out of industry history books. I was 14 the night my uncle humiliated me. It wasn't just some passing comment. It wasn't harmless. It was the moment that split my life into before and after. It happened at this fancy executive gala in downtown Chicago. I had no business being there. I didn't even want to go, but my dad insisted. He said I should see success up close. I think he hoped it would inspire me. Instead, it lit something darker in me. Something cold and slow that took years to grow. The ballroom was packed with people in suits and gowns, drinking wine I couldn't pronounce. The chandeliers looked like something out of a movie. I stood awkwardly near the back in a stiff blue dress that didn't fit right. I kept pulling at the sleeves. It had a tag from a clearance rack at Macy's, and I was praying no one could tell. My Uncle Rick was the center of it all. Rich, loud, smug. He ran Whitmore Capital, which was a big deal at the time. Some private equity firm that swallowed smaller companies and flipped them for a profit. Everyone loved him, especially himself. He was drunk. He always drank too much. He got up on the little stage with a champagne glass in hand and started giving a toast. He slurred through some speech about growth, innovation, family legacy, all that polished garbage they say when they want to sound important. Then he saw me. He pointed his glass right at me and said, "Everyone meet my niece. She's proof that good intentions aren't enough." He laughed. People laughed with him. I just stood there, frozen. My stomach dropped. My face burned. I remember hearing forks hit plates and fake chuckles all around me. My dad gave a weak laugh too, trying to play it off. But I saw the way he looked down, like someone had just kicked him in the chest. That's the thing about humiliation, it doesn't have to be loud to ruin you. Sometimes one sentence in the wrong room sticks with you longer than 1,000 compliments ever could. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. But right then I decided I would destroy him. It didn't happen quickly. It couldn't. I wasn't from money. I didn't have connections. My mom cleaned houses. My dad sold life insurance door to door. After high school, I didn't go to college. I worked at a diner during the day and typed invoices at night for a shipping company. But I read everything I could. Business books. Finance blogs. I taught myself accounting. I printed out SEC filings and studied them during lunch breaks. I made a plan. I wasn't going to beat Rick by being louder. I was going to be smarter, slower, invisible. Eventually, I got into Northwestern on a scholarship. I studied finance like my life depended on it.
No distractions.
No friends. Just focus. I didn't party. I didn't date. I worked 2 jobs and sent half my paychecks home. After graduation, I didn't chase big names. I went where the real money moved, quiet firms that managed old money. I learned how rich people really operate. How they hide wealth, protect it, transfer it. How they lie legally. I studied family trusts, offshore banking, shell companies. I learned the weak spots. And I watched Rick's company from the shadows. Whitmore Capital was a dinosaur. It looked shiny on the outside, but inside? It was built on ego, shortcuts, and nepotism. His 2 sons, Eric and Brad, were spoiled idiots. His daughter, Tiffany, ran a charity arm that was just a tax shelter. I kept notes on all of them. I watched their habits, where they traveled, who they hired, where they moved money. Took 15 years, but I built my own network. I created LLCs under different names. I ran small investment companies. I had people who trusted me. I had assets. I had leverage. Then I started phase 1. It began with Brad. He always wanted to prove he was a visionary. Total idiot. I had one of my companies pose as a green energy startup. We hired actors, staged a fake prototype, created a buzz on niche tech blogs. Brad bit. He wired $18 million into it within 2 months. Then we stalled. Missed deadlines. Blamed overseas delays. Supply chain issues. He panicked and sold off 2 of their European assets just to rebalance the books. One of the buyers? Me. Then Eric. He thought he was some finance genius. We baited him with a security software firm and faked its numbers to look explosive. He overpaid for it. We leaked a fake data breach 6 months later. Their clients bailed. Whitmore Capital took a huge hit on that one. Their quarterly earnings dropped 12% just from that single move. Tiffany was easy. Her nonprofit looked clean on paper, but we found the gaps. I had one of my shell orgs donate $2 million to her Clean Water in Africa initiative. Then we leaked a report showing her numbers didn't match up photos of wells that didn't exist, receipts for events that never happened. It wasn't even criminal. Just stupid. The board forced her out. She left the country and never came back. By then the company was weak. Morale was down. Investors were nervous. That's when I hit the trust. Rick had always bragged about the family trust. Said it was untouchable. It held the real wealth, land, shares, legacy stakes in key industries. It was his Dynasty insurance policy. But there was a clause in the trust documents from 1983. I found it through a connection who worked in estate law. It said that if the company suffered 3 consecutive quarters with losses above 18% due to executive mismanagement, the trust would lose protection. It could be restructured by outside fiduciaries. No one had ever triggered it before. I made sure we did. I moved money around, bought and dumped stocks, created fake reports. I used anonymous blogs to leak rumors. I hired forensic auditors to discover irregularities from Rick's tax filings in the early 2000s. One of them was real. The rest didn't have to be. Investors panicked. A few who secretly worked for me pulled out. That forced others to follow. Stock dropped. Lawsuits were filed. Banks got nervous. Rick stepped down. The board pushed him out. Brad tried to fix it, but he didn't know what he was doing. Eric froze. By the time the third bad quarter closed, the clause was triggered. The trust collapsed. Took everything down with it. Their properties were seized. Their shares were absorbed by competitors. Their name was dragged through every finance paper in the country. Tiffany stayed in Bali and never returned. Eric and Brad fled to the Cayman Islands using shell passports. Their kids filed to have their last names changed legally. They didn't want to be associated with Whitmore. Rick died 6 months later. Heart failure. Quiet. Alone. No ceremony. No empire left to mourn him. I didn't send flowers. I didn't say a word. I just went back to work. Because I wasn't done yet. Just when I thought it was over, when I thought I'd closed the book on Rick Whitmore and his bloodline, I got a message. It was anonymous. No name, just a Proton Mail address and one line. I know what you did. At first, I ignored it. I had covered my tracks. Every company I used had layers of proxies. The donations, the shell corporations, the offshore accounts I'd spent years making sure nothing ever traced back to me. Then came the second email. You're not as invisible as you think. You took down Rick. I know how. Let's talk or I talk. This time, there was an attachment. It was a photo blurry, taken from security footage. It was me, stepping out of a law firm in Manhattan 2 years earlier. A firm that specialized in trust litigation. I had used an alias. Worn a wig. I thought I'd been careful. Clearly not careful enough. I didn't panic. Not outwardly. But inside I felt that same fire I'd felt when I was 14. That helpless, exposed feeling. I replied simply, "What do you want?" The response came a day later. "I want in." His name was Jordan Levin, mid-40s, used to work in asset recovery for one of Rick's competitors, Delridge Holdings. He'd figured out part of what I was doing halfway through the collapse, but he hadn't said anything. He'd watched, tracked the patterns. He was smart, dangerously smart. And bitter. Apparently, Rick had once tanked a merger that would have made Jordan a partner. Cost him millions. Got him blacklisted from the firm. He wanted revenge too. But he didn't want Rick's empire destroyed. He wanted to inherit it. He told me the Whitmore Trust still had one piece left. A foreign holding company registered in Liechtenstein. Barely traceable. Worth at least $60 million. hidden deep under layers of dummy directors and frozen capital. "Let's split it," he said. "You did the hard part. I know how to unlock it." I didn't trust him. Not for a second. But I also didn't ignore him. We met once. Neutral location. A park in DC, crowded enough to be safe, quiet enough to talk. He brought proof. Real documents. Stuff I didn't have access to, even with all my reach. He had whistleblower files from a Swiss bank Rick once used. It showed payments to fake vendors, quiet transfers, interest statements from accounts tied to shell foundations. Names I'd never seen before. He said he could get me into the account if I gave him full access to one of the holding firms I controlled. It would make the transfer look like a routine asset reallocation. I told him I needed time. He gave me 1 week. I didn't go home that night. I stayed in a small Airbnb under a fake name and thought about every choice I had made up until that moment. Jordan was a risk. A big one. But $60 million wasn't nothing. And if he really did have access to those vaults, that would be the final nail. The true erasure of the Whitmore legacy. But then another twist. 3 days later, my apartment in Milwaukee was broken into. Nothing was stolen. But someone had clearly gone through my files. Notebooks, external drives, old paper records I kept locked in a fireproof cabinet. All opened. Photocopied. Then put back like nothing had happened. But I noticed. There was a tiny red fiber from a glove caught in the edge of the cabinet. And a single post-it stuck on the back of my bathroom mirror. Blank. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Someone else was watching now. I did a sweep. Digital. Physical. Checked my aliases. Checked my accounts. 2 of my LLCs were being audited suddenly randomly, but not really. Something was leaking. And then it hit me, Jordan didn't just want to split. He wanted me off the board. He wanted to take everything and pin it on me. I changed the game again. I used an old contact at a private cybersecurity firm. Paid extra for silence. Told them I needed to fake a data breach, one that looked like my own firm's had been hacked. We scrubbed my servers clean. Wiped out the old drives. Deleted trails. Rewrote IPs. Rebuilt digital fingerprints to point to Eastern Europe. Then I set a trap for Jordan. I told him I was ready to transfer access. But instead of giving him credentials to my real holding firm, I gave him access to a dummy corp registered in Delaware. One with its own planted financial crimes. One designed to flag automatic alerts the second he touched it. He took the bait. The feds raided his condo in DC a week later. But here's the part that still haunts me. Jordan didn't go down quietly. He had a dead man's switch. Before his arrest, he sent out a timed package to 2 journalists, one financial watchdog group, and an anonymous Reddit user who had once covered Rick's company scandal. Inside the files. Partial proof of what I'd done. Not enough to nail me, but enough to raise questions. Enough for people to start looking deeper. That was a year ago. I've been moving ever since. Different cities. Different names. Everything digital is masked. I live quiet now. Alone. I still have money, plenty of it. But I barely touch it. Because I know the story isn't done. There's one more twist. One more person I need to find. One final threat I haven't dealt with yet. Rick's oldest grandson. The only one who never erased the Whitmore name. The one who disappeared right after the collapse. I saw his name pop up in a private donor list for a think tank in Boston 2 weeks ago. He's resurfacing. And if he's rebuilding anything, I'll tear it down. I wasn't planning on going back to Boston. I had too much history there. Too many files, too many fingerprints. But if Rick's grandson Caleb Whitmore was coming out of hiding, I couldn't ignore it. I had done too much to let that family name crawl back out of the grave. I started small. The think tank where his name appeared, North Crescent Policy Initiative, was supposedly focused on ethical investment strategies for the next generation. Corporate speak for grooming legacy kids into leadership roles. They didn't list their donors publicly, but someone had leaked a screenshot of their internal donor list to a subforum on finance grifts. Caleb's name was at the bottom. Not as a donor, but as a strategic partner. That meant access. That meant money. That meant Caleb was planning something. I dug into his recent activity. For years he'd been off-grid. After Rick died and the lawsuits exploded, Caleb had withdrawn from Columbia halfway through his master's in political economics. Changed his phone, wiped his social media, and went dark. But the past 6 months? He'd resurfaced in Boston under a new LLC, Whitmore Holdings Group LLC. No website. Just a P.O. box and a payment processing gateway. He wasn't just surviving. He was rebuilding. And here's the twist that stopped me cold. One of the shell companies he absorbed used to be mine. He had bought out an old holding corp I had shut down 5 years ago. A dormant shell I left behind after a restructuring in Delaware. The paper trail was weak, but it still had Ghosttrace's accounting records, old transfer logs, fragments of deals tied to my operation. He had my fingerprints in his hands, and he had to know it. First I thought it was random, a fluke. Then I got a burner call from an old associate I hadn't spoken to in years. She said a man claiming to represent a legacy restructuring family fund had offered her $100,000 to talk about me. About old deals. About any unusual activity during the time I dismantled Whitmore Capital. She didn't take the money, but she warned me. Whoever this guy is, she said, he's digging deep. He knows what he's looking for. Caleb wasn't trying to restore the Whitmore name. He was trying to reverse engineer the takedown. I couldn't let that happen. But I couldn't strike blindly either. Not this time. Caleb was careful. Smarter than his father and uncle. He had the blood of a vulture capitalist, but the patience of someone who'd watched his whole world burn. He wasn't rebuilding an empire out of pride. He was rebuilding it to come for me. So I changed tactics. I reached out to someone I had sworn I would never speak to again. My cousin Andrea. She was Rick's niece on his wife's side. Not technically a Whitmore by blood, but close enough to have been in the room during all those years of dinners and backroom deals. She was the only one who walked away from the family when the scandals hit. She moved to Seattle. Teaches high school English now. Wants nothing to do with any of it. She picked up after the third call. Her voice was cold at first. Distant. I didn't blame her. You're the reason they're gone, she said. No, I replied. They're the reason they're gone. I'm the reason they didn't get away with it. Silence. Then. Why are you calling? I need to know what Caleb was like as a kid. She let out a breath. Almost laughed. Quiet. Watched everything. Kept score. That chilled me. I asked if she knew what he was doing now. I got a weird letter a month ago, she said. From a trust. It said I was named as a beneficiary of reconciliation funds. Thought it was a scam. It wasn't. Caleb was trying to reclaim the inner circle, the last few stragglers who still carried the Whitmore name, even loosely. And he was doing it through reparations. He was offering payouts. Guilt money. Cleaning up the name. Creating legitimacy. That's when I realized he didn't just want to rebuild. He wanted to rewrite the past. So I flipped the board again. I created a new identity. A donor. Wealthy. Conservative. I used connections from my private equity days to fake a background and submitted an application to donate to North Crescent Policy Initiative. They approved the meeting. I walked into their Boston office 2 weeks later wearing a dark blazer, a silk scarf, and a name that didn't exist. And there he was. Caleb Whitmore. He looked nothing like his father.
No espraitan, no smagues mirk.
He was clean, serious, unreadable. He shook my hand and looked me dead in the eyes. He didn't recognize me. Not yet. He gave the pitch. Talked about stability, intergenerational ethics, and correcting financial violence through legacy engagement. It was polished. Sharp. Fake. At the end of the meeting I stood and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" He tilted his head. I leaned in and whispered, "Tell me, Caleb, when your grandfather lost everything, did it hurt?" The color drained from his face. I walked out before he could speak. 2 days later, I got another anonymous message. Not from him, but from a third party. Just 4 words. He's not working alone. That message, "he's not working alone," changed everything. At first, I thought it was just paranoia. But when you've spent years dismantling a dynasty and burning the ruins, you learn to trust paranoia. I checked every lead I had. Revisited my firewall logs, my old proxy servers, even physical locations I hadn't touched in a decade. Then I found it. A hidden pattern in a dormant holding company I'd buried long ago, Anchor Bay Ventures. A shell I used in phase 1 when I first tricked Brad into investing in my fake green tech startup. It was supposed to be shut down, but someone had reactivated it. The name on the new paperwork? Elliot Ryerson, my father's former best friend, and Rick Whitmore's original CFO. He was supposed to be retired, dead weight, gone from the industry. I hadn't even thought about him in over 15 years. But there he was, quietly funneling assets out of old Whitmore remnants and working behind the scenes with Caleb to resurrect the entire thing. Except they weren't rebuilding Whitmore Capital under the same name. They were creating something new. Risen Equity Group. A clean firm with clean books and a clean mission statement. ESG-driven, impact-oriented, backed by rebranded trust capital from dead relatives who could no longer speak for themselves. But when I dug deeper, I found the truth. This new firm was built on every secret I left behind. Old tax filings from dummy accounts. Restructured loans I thought were gone. Documents I had signed under aliases. They weren't building a new empire. They were using my old moves to do it. And if it ever came out, if someone followed the money, I wouldn't just lose my anonymity. I'd go to prison. That's when I made the final decision. No more pieces on the board. No more slow plays. It was time to burn the board itself. I started by feeding tips to the same financial watchdog group that Jordan had once used before I took him down. Anonymous files. Real evidence. I gave them just enough to get curious real estate fraud, nonprofit asset laundering, and insider funding to a new financial firm led by a mysterious heir. I wrapped it all in jargon and let it drip into their inboxes like I was just a whistleblower with a grudge. Next, I reactivated my oldest, riskiest move. A fake whistleblower lawsuit. Filed under one of my retired aliases, I accused Risen Equity Group of financial misrepresentation and trust asset laundering. I included shell documents linking back to Anchor Bay Ventures, now run by Elliot, and let it slip to one reporter I trusted in D.C. It took 4 days for the story to explode. The fallout: federal investigators raided Risen Equity Group's Boston office before sunrise. Caleb was detained. Not arrested yet. But his laptop, phone, and safe were all seized. Elliot Ryerson tried to run. His passport was flagged. He was caught in Toronto. The firm collapsed overnight. Their biggest institutional partners froze funding. Clients pulled out. One Swiss bank leaked emails showing Caleb had used manipulated reports to court legacy investors. Then came the bombshell. Caleb, in trying to prove I took down Rick illegally, had been building a case for months. He had old files, witness statements, emails. All of it stored in encrypted backups. One of those backups leaked. I don't know who did it. Maybe Elliot. Maybe someone I missed. But it was out now. And I was in it. They came for me 2 weeks later. Not with guns. Not with headlines. With a federal subpoena and a sealed indictment. Money laundering. Fraud. Misuse of offshore accounts. Identity manipulation. My aliases were burned. My holdings were frozen. My passport? Revoked. The only thing that saved me? I had leverage. I had files of my own. Proof of deeper corruption within the Whitmore empire before I ever touched it. Tax evasion. Bribery. Campaign donations that violated every rule. So we made a deal. I handed everything over. Every drive. Every backup. Every map. In return? No prison. But no freedom either. I lost everything. I now live under a different name. In a city I don't like. With a job that pays just enough to cover rent and groceries. I'm watched. My internet access is monitored. I can't own stock. I can't start companies. I can't leave the country. I erased the Whitmores. But I erased myself too. Caleb, he took a plea deal. 3 years in federal prison, no parole. Released under supervised monitoring. He now works at a startup in North Carolina under a new name. Quiet. No press.
No legacy.
Elliot, serving a 10-year sentence. Asset seizure stripped him down to nothing. His pension was gone. His wife left him. The rest of the family? Still scattered. Still bitter. still pretending they weren't part of it. None of them used the Whitmore name anymore. The family mansion? Demolished. Turned into a community center. Their story? Reduced to footnotes in financial scandals. I won. But I'm alone. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wonder if that girl in the blue Macy's dress would even recognize me. Would she be proud? Would she be horrified? I don't know. But I do know this. Rick pointed at me once and laughed in front of everyone. Now there's no one left to remember his name. And that's enough.